wind howled across the empty fields, fierce and relentless, slicing through the quiet of the Texas night. Beneath that angry gust, amid the chatter of startled birds and the rustle of dry leaves, a figure crouched low in the dimly lit chicken coop. It was a small, cramped space, scarcely a refuge, but it was all she had. Heart pounding in her chest, everything felt sharp and alive: the scent of hay, the soft clucks of startled hens, the itchy feel of straw beneath her fingers. She knew she wasn't safe, not yet. The cool night air sent shivers down her spine, a constant reminder of her vulnerable state. Just hours before, she had made a desperate run, bound to escape a life that felt like a noose tightening around her throat. Her escape had been bold, daring, and maddeningly reckless. Now, hiding in this chicken coop, she could only hope he wouldn't find her. As the shadows deepened, the clang of a boot echoed from outside. She could hear the crunch of gravel beneath heavy steps. Panic surged in her chest. It was him, the cowboy. She pressed herself against the wooden wall, feeling tangled in the presence of fear and uncertainty. He was a force of nature, tall and rugged, with a demeanor that could stop a stampede. A dust-covered Stetson pulled low over his brow only added to the air of mystery surrounding him. She had seen him before, roaming these parts with an easy bravado that set hearts racing. But she never thought he'd be the one searching for her, hunting through the night as if she were simply another piece of livestock gone astray. His voice rang out into the darkness, rough yet strangely calming. "I know you're in there." The way he spoke wasn't menacing, it was almost inviting, laden with an assurance that made her heart race even faster. "You don't have to be afraid," he continued, his tone softening as he stepped closer. Could she trust him? Even in the midst of her desperation, doubts clawed at her. Memories of a life filled with betrayal and heartache cascaded back, almost too heavy to bear. Could this man, this cowboy with his rugged charm, really be different? Or was he like all the rest, ready to trap her again? The chickens shuffled nervously, sensing her tension, and for a brief moment it seemed as if the world outside held its breath. Every instinct told her to stay hidden, to blend into the shadows and avoid him at all costs. But then, amidst the swirling confusion, she felt a voice within a whisper urging her to emerge, to seek the warmth of safety over the frigid thrills of hiding. She took one slow, deliberate breath, brushing aside the chaos swirling around in her mind. With trembling fingers, she pushed the loose straw away and peeked through the makeshift door. And there he stood, silhouetted against the moonlight, the night air swirling around him, igniting the ruggedness of his features. His eyes glimmered, sharp and piercing, but not with malice. No, it was an intensity mixed with a strange empathy that caught her off guard. "I'm only here to help," he said, his voice steady, devoid of impatience. Something in his demeanor struck a chord within her, a flicker of hope amid the shadows of despair. Maybe he really meant it. Maybe he could help in ways she had long given up on. Warily, she pushed the door open a crack, allowing the cool night to rush against her face. She asked, her voice shaky but steady. "Because I've been where you are," he replied, eyes softening. "And I didn't have anyone to reach out to." With each word he spoke, she felt walls she had built around her heart start to crumble. Trust was a fragile thing, difficult to grasp but yearned for. And here was a man who seemed to understand that deep truth, even in the chaos of her world. As she stepped out into the moonlight, a sense of freedom washed over her, a sense she hadn't felt in ages. She looked into his deep-set eyes, searching for anything that might betray a hidden agenda, yet all she saw was sincerity. She asked, knowing all too well how cruel the world could be. "Not at all," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You deserve a chance to choose your own path." Just then, the air filled with the piercing sound of a far-off engine, the unmistakable growl of a truck drawing near, interrupting that fragile bond growing between them. His expression shifted, tense and alert. Adrenaline rushed through her veins as she followed him out of the coop, heart hammering as they ducked behind bales of hay. She could hear the truck approaching, its headlights sweeping in wide arcs across the fields. Panic surged in her chest once more, as familiar images of dread crept in, imagining that dark figure behind the wheel, searching for her. "Breathe," he instructed quietly, his eyes locked onto hers. They moved swiftly, darting from one shadow to another, crouching low, adrenaline fueling every swift decision. She could feel the warmth of his hand brushing against hers, a commanding presence that grounded her even amidst the rising tide of fear. "That's it," he whispered, guiding her through the darkness, burning with a fierce determination to outrun the looming danger. When the truck stopped and its engine fell silent, she held her breath, half expecting to see those familiar, menacing eyes emerge from the cab. But he remained focused, urging her onward toward a beat-up ranch truck parked nearby, its antidote to looming despair. The cowboy nodded toward the passenger's side. "Get in," he said, never breaking eye contact, as if his gaze alone could shield her from whatever awaited them. She hesitated. Could she really trust him? Memories of heartache brushed against her mind, the haunting echoes of broken promises. But the thought of running back into that life caused a chill to wrap around her spine. With one final look at the chicken coop that had sheltered her only moments before, she climbed into the truck, the door slamming shut behind her like a seal on her fate. The cowboy slid into the driver's seat. "Hold on," he said, his voice firm even as his expression softened. As they pulled away, she caught a glimpse of headlights cutting through the dust-laden road behind them, two shadows flaring to life in the rearview mirror. She gripped the door handle, knuckles white in fear. She choked out, her heart pounding. "They won't," he promised, eyes locked on the road ahead. The truck lurched forward, gaining speed, its old engine roaring defiantly against the night. They raced through the winding dirt paths, the landscape blurring by fields sprawling like wild dreams under the expansive Texas sky. The cowboy kept glancing at her, eyes full of a promise she dared to hope for. In the midst of the chaos, her heart began to settle. She sensed a shift inside, a burgeoning belief that perhaps she could escape her old life. That maybe, just maybe, this man beside her wasn't a mirage conjured up by desperation, but rather a thread of hope woven into her fate. She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To a place where you can breathe," he replied, intensity shaping his every word. "Somewhere no one will find you." As they turned onto a narrow road, she squeezed her eyes shut, leaning back against the worn upholstery of the seat. Memories flooded her mind, swirling with every heartbeat, each moment spent in fear, each dream eclipsed by darkness. She wanted to fight back, to reclaim her narrative, but the shadow of her past loomed large. She ventured, wanting to fill the silence, to shy away from her own doubts. A hint of a smile danced on his lips, faint but warm. "It's in my blood. My folks have been ranching here for generations." The road twisted and turned, though each curve felt less like a threat and more like an opportunity, a glint of sunlight breaking through dark clouds. As they drove deeper into the night, she inhaled the freedom filling the spaces between them. She saw himself in a new light, a protector, a guide, maybe even a friend. The tension began to ease, and she felt the warmth of belief curl around her heart. "You've got a strength in you," he said, catching her eyes once again. "Not many people would have done what you did." His words struck a chord, reigniting a spark long extinguished in her soul. She wanted to believe him, wanted to reach out for something she thought she'd lost forever. "I don't know how to be that person," she confessed softly, her voice trembling. "Then let me show you," he replied, the sincerity in his voice a balm to her battered spirit. As the moon cast its silver glow across the landscape, she felt something new stirring within, an ember of resilience, a yearning to reclaim her story, one fearless step at a time. In that moment, she believed in the possibility of beginnings, of new roads leading to glimmers of hope. Perhaps this cowboy, lost in the dark of night, would help guide her through. And as they sped toward an uncertain horizon, one thing became clear. Sometimes the unlikeliest of saviors could pull you from the darkness, if only you dared to step out and embrace the light that awaited. The wind whispered through the open window, a harbinger of what lay ahead. She neither knew nor cared where it would end. She just knew that for the first time in a long time she felt alive. And that, in itself, was a start. The air was thick with tension, the kind that clung to the skin, as the moon cast a pale glow on the sprawling Texas landscape. In the heart of the chaos, a young woman crouched low in a chicken coop, the wooden walls surrounding her feeling like both a shelter and a prison. Darkness cloaked her like a shroud, muffling her fearful breaths. She could hear the distant hum of engines, the angry shouts that drove her deeper into the shadows. Each heartbeat was a countdown as she pressed herself into the straw, hoping the hens scattered around her could mask her fear. Just hours earlier, she had dashed from the only life she ever knew, a life staked in fear and suffocation. Now her heart raced with both terror and something else, a flicker of hope. Outside, the boots of a lone cowboy crunched over gravel, the sound slicing through the night, sending chills racing down her spine. "I know you're in there," he called out, his voice deep yet unthreatening, carrying the weight of a man used to the land and its secrets. She remained silent, fear holding her captive as she felt a mix of terror and curiosity wash over her. What would he do if he found her? Would he drag her back to the nightmare she had fled? Or was he a beacon of light, a potential savior pulled from the pages of stories she'd only dared to dream about? "Come on out," he urged softly, his tone inviting. For a brief moment, those words reached into her, nearly piercing through the walls she had constructed around her heart. Could she trust him? She peered through a crack in the henhouse, catching a glimpse of the cowboy against the moonlit backdrop. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a rugged charm that seemed both grounded and wild, like a storm ready to break. "Please," he said, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. She felt the weight of his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes anchoring her. The chickens around her settled, sensing her unease. The world beyond the coop was dark, yet the promise of freedom ignited a small flame of courage within her, urging her to emerge. With every nerve alive, she slowly pushed the door open, the creaking wood sounding like thunder in the stillness. She stepped out, her heart racing as the moonlight washed over her. She whispered, each word laced with skepticism. He took a step back, giving her space, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped," he said, vulnerability spilling from him as he spoke. "I grew up in a world that tried to tell me who I should be, but I broke free." His words resonated deep within her, stirring memories of her own fight, the struggles, the pain she had endured. It was a crushing weight, but now, standing here, faced with a stranger who seemed to understand her plight, she felt that weight begin to lift. Just as she began to let herself believe, the rumble of a truck echoed in the distance, slicing through the fragile hope that had formed between them. Her stomach dropped. "They're coming," she gasped. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the safety of the night. The urgency in his movements made her pulse race. She felt the heat of his hand against her skin, calming and exhilarating all at once. She asked, breathless as they ran toward his truck, parked a few yards away under the vast Texas sky. She could hear the approaching engine growl, foreboding as it broke through the tranquil night. "People who want to keep you trapped," he replied, urgency lacing his words. She was torn between fear and the undeniable urge to trust him. As they reached the truck, she hesitated. "I don't know who you are," she said, panic creeping in. He interrupted, his voice firm but still holding that undercurrent of reassurance. In that moment, instinct took over. The loose gravel crunched beneath their feet as she hopped into the passenger seat, the door slamming shut like a barrier between her and her captors. He jumped in beside her, turning the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life, drowning out the ominous sounds disappearing into the night. With a quick glance back, he pressed the gas pedal, and they lurched forward, tearing away from the chicken coop that had offered both shelter and fear. As they sped down the dirt road, adrenaline coursing through her body, she felt more alive than she had in years. As they drove, the night embraced them, the shadows swirling outside, yet she felt something different inside, an emerging strength, a sense of freedom. She asked, eager for something to latch onto. "Jake," he replied, his focus unwavering on the road ahead, yet his eyes flicking in her direction. He smiled, a flash of warmth in the depths of the night. She echoed, a hesitant smile forming on her lips. "And then what?" Jake took a deep breath, the tension easing momentarily from his features. "We'll figure it out together." "Together," she repeated, tasting the word like honey, a promise of partnership. The miles rolled on, the landscape shifting like the storm brewing within her. Each moment spent speeding away from the life she once knew felt like peeling back layers of a hard shell. Memories flickered, images of being trapped, being dictated, all merging into a single roaring tide that she was pushing against. Jake asked, breaking the silence, his eyes remaining sharp on the road while keeping her in his periphery. For a heartbeat, vulnerability threatened to wash over her. She had kept her story inside for so long her fears held hostage. But in the face of kindness, she felt ready to share. I was running from someone, she admitted, her throat tight. The words flowed, heavy but necessary. I didn't want to end up like my mom. Jake's expression shifted, understanding etching across his face. I'm sorry, he murmured. You're stronger than you know, Claire. The bond forged between them deepened, surviving in the heat of revelation under the stars. But the world outside remained unpredictable, dark shadows of the past lurking just out of sight. And in the distance, the glow of headlights flared, a menacing light growing closer. Keep your head down, Jake instructed sharply, his voice steady, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Claire's heart raced as she sank low in her seat, a wave of fear rushing back. They won't, he assured her, determination flooding his words. As the truck picked up speed, her mind raced images of what could happen if they turned them back. She had tasted a fleeting sense of freedom and she wasn't ready to lose it. The world outside blurred, turned into a dizzying canvas of possibility. The most important thing right now is to keep moving, he urged, weaving through the twisting roads. Think about what you want for yourself. Her heart leaped at the thought. A life where I can breathe, she replied, the words spilling out like a newfound anthem. Jake nodded, a glint of pride lighting his eyes. The headlights behind them continued to chase, relentless like the shadows of the past. I can't go back, she whispered, a hint of desperation creeping in. We won't, he promised, the conviction in his tone shaking her to her core. Just trust me, Claire. As they sped into the night, she felt an awakening deep within, a fire that refused to be snuffed out. With every mile they traveled, she surrendered to the idea that maybe she could shape her own destiny. And maybe, just maybe, this cowboy was the guide she never knew she needed. The road stretched ahead, winding toward an uncertain horizon, the future glimmering like the rising sun, promising warmth and possibility. Together, they would ride toward whatever came next, bound by bravery and choices uncharted. And so they raced onward, the chick that had hidden in the coop finally breaking free, wings unfurling like a burst of dawn against the velvet night. She was ready for whatever came next, ready to reclaim her life. In the distance, the headlights began to fade, swallowed by the expanse of the Texas night, leaving behind only the sound of the wind whistling, a sweet serenade of freedom unfurling into a new beginning. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the quiet fields of Texas. In the dim light, the rusted frame of an old chicken coop stood like a sentinel, one that had witnessed countless secrets and stories. Inside, a young woman crouched, her heart racing as she peered through the slats. The world outside was dark, but she could hear the distant roar of tires on gravel, the murmur of voices searching for her. Every second felt like an eternity. She had always imagined how she would escape, but the reality was nothing like she had pictured. She had slipped out into the night, feeling the chains of her old life fall away, but now panic threatened to close in around her. The scent of warm straw mixed with the faint smell of chicken feed filled her nostrils, grounding her even as fear threatened to take hold. She could hear the footsteps now, heavy and deliberate, growing closer. Their shadows danced with the flickering light, and that's when it happened. A voice, rich and deep, cut through the stillness. I know you're in there, he called out, a hint of authority wrapped in warmth. Who was this stranger? The way he spoke stirred something within her, a flicker of hope mingled with uncertainty. She remained frozen, blending into the shadows of the coop as she processed his words. Please, he urged, softer now. A memory flashed through her mind, a life spent under the control of someone who claimed to love her but had trapped her in a prison of fear and despair. It felt strange, almost foreign, to think someone might actually want to help her. The thought both excited and terrified her. Suddenly, the wind gusted outside, rattling the coop with a low moan. With every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, she fought against the voice urging her to step out. But could she trust him? A moment passed, heavy with tension, before she finally pushed the door open just a crack. Peeking through the wooden slats, she saw him, the cowboy. He stood tall against the backdrop of the moon, a silhouette framed by the night. The denim of his jeans hugged strong legs, and the brim of his hat shielded his eyes. But even from this distance, she could sense a gentleness about him. Come on out, he said again, his tone now coaxing, melodic even. Taking a deep breath, her pulse pounding in her ears, she stepped out into the moonlight, trembling as the cool air enveloped her. Instantly, she regretted it, second-guessing this decision as his dark eyes locked onto hers. She managed, her voice shaky. "Because I've been where you are," he replied, the sincerity in his voice sending a shiver down her spine. A glimmer of recognition sparked within her. Perhaps he understood her struggle. Within those words lay a shared possibility, a sense of camaraderie, a connection she'd never known she needed. But the world was still full of uncertainty, and the wind carried whispers of danger. Suddenly, the sounds of a pickup truck echoed in the distance, cutting sharply into that moment of fragile trust. The cowboy's expression turned grave, and he quickly scanned the horizon. "We need to go." Heart hammering, she took a small step back, the fear swirling within her like a storm. She stammered, anxiety clawing at her throat. "They won't," he said, urgency lacing his words. "But we have to move fast." Panic tightened her chest, but she was running out of options. Choosing to remain hidden again felt like a death sentence. Summoning every ounce of courage, she made her decision. "Okay," she whispered, taking a step toward him. He reached out, his strong hand guiding her to the side of a dusty old truck parked nearby. "Get in," he instructed. The tenderness in his voice brought a flicker of hope. With shaky fingers, she climbed into the passenger seat just as the truck's headlights pierced the dark like a spotlight. He jumped in beside her, slamming the door as though sealing away the past. The engine revved, and they sped off into the night, the tires kicking up dust from the road as freedom pulled them forward. As the truck roared down the twisting dirt path, she felt like a ghost escaping from a haunted house, both exhilarated and terrified. Glancing sideways, she caught sight of his strong profile. The determination etched across his features sent warmth flooding through her. She asked, her voice rising above the wind whipping past the windows. "Name's Jake," he said, his eyes focused on the road but softening with her curiosity. "I'm just a simple cowboy trying to help." Simple cowboy. The phrase grounded her as she contemplated the possibilities ahead. She asked, doubt creeping back in despite her desire to believe him. "You need a safe place, a chance to breathe. There's a ranch a few miles from here, my family's place." His voice radiated confidence. For the first time in a long time, she dared to hope. Safe. The word hung in the air like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Could it really be that simple? Jerking her thoughts back, she looked out the window, the landscape a blur of shadow and starlight. Each passing second slipped away, mingling fear with a feeling she had almost forgotten. "Hope?" she asked, curiosity overpowering her skepticism. He glanced at her, and she caught the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Nothing but a sense of rightness. "I can't stand by while someone's being hunted. It's not who I am." As they sped through the night, Claire felt a twinge in her chest. That second chance was precisely what she had been longing for. The echoes of her past hovered in her thoughts, but here was an opportunity, a new beginning, and she clung to it with everything she had. The truck surged forward, the wind whistling through the cracked windows, blending with the sound of her racing heart. She glanced back at the road behind them, half expecting to see headlights in pursuit. But the darkness remained still, the only sound their breathing mingling with the engine's song. Jake asked suddenly, breaking the silence and pulling her from her thoughts. She hesitated, weighing his sincerity against her memories. "I was running from him," she finally admitted, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "He's been trying to control me, to keep me locked away." His voice was laced with conviction. "You have to reclaim your story, and you will." Their eyes met, and for that moment clarity enveloped her. This wasn't just a cowboy rescuing a damsel in distress. It was a partnership, a shared journey toward freedom. She didn't need saving as much as she needed a friend, someone who believed in her strength when she struggled to believe in herself. Time slipped away as they drove, and the miles melted into a rhythm of possibility. The weight of despair began to lift, replaced with anticipation of what lay ahead. The fear that threatened to drag her back started to fade into the background, like smoke dissipating in a breeze. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Jake said, breaking her reverie, glancing at her with a knowing smile. The words resonated deep within her, a truth she needed to hear. Every decision she had made up until now had been weighed down by fear. But now she had a chance to choose again. As they approached the ranch, a sense of calm washed over her. The outline of the farmhouse rose in the moonlight, framed by sprawling fields and wide-open spaces. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of home, something more profound than merely a structure. It was a chance to rebuild. Jake parked the truck and turned to her, his expression serious. This is a safe haven. Stepping out, Claire felt the cool earth beneath her feet, grounding her. She turned to him, gratitude washing over her. Thank you, Jake. Just doing what feels right, he replied, a warm smile lighting his face. But remember, taking that first step into the light, that's all you. As they moved toward the house, Claire wondered what the future held. She felt the remnants of fear still whispering in her mind, but they were quieter now, almost a distant echo. Here, in this safe space, she could think, breathe, and begin anew. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee greeted them, intertwining with the warmth of a modest home, simple but inviting. With each step further into the house, she felt herself shedding the past, leaving behind the shackles of despair. Let's get you something warm to drink, Jake suggested as he moved into the kitchen. As he prepared coffee, she sank into a chair at the rustic table, the wood cool against her fingers. Just weeks ago, she had felt shrouded in darkness, clinging to a frayed rope of hope. Now, as her heart began to steady, she sensed that something had shifted within her. She wasn't just physically escaping, she was reclaiming her life. Here you go, Jake said, sliding a steaming cup of coffee across the table. Take your time. Gripping the warm cup between her hands, she let the heat seep into her bones, grounding her further. The silence in the house was a beautiful kind of quiet, and while the shadows of her past would always linger, this was a brand new beginning. She drank in the moment, a blend of excitement and trepidation. What would she do? How would she begin again? Every possibility stretched out like a vast sky, unanswered questions hovering like stars in the night. Jake asked, breaking the silence again. I do, she replied, heart tightening at the thought, but I don't want to go back to them, not now. Understandable, he said, nodding in empathy. It's hard to break free from what we know, even if it's chains. A tear slipped down her cheek, surprising her. It was a mixture of gratitude and relief for the understanding she had craved for so long. She wasn't alone anymore. She was a part of this journey with someone who believed in her enough to fight for her freedom. No one gets to decide your worth except you, Jake added gently, his voice carrying warmth. If you decide to stay, that's your choice. If you choose to go, I'll help you. Staring down into her coffee, she considered the weight of his words. Here, more than ever, she felt empowered to decide her fate. She could create a life that felt authentic, free from fear, full of possibility. She finally asked, lifting her gaze to meet his. Every step of the way, he said, his promise laced with sincerity. The shadows of the past didn't vanish completely, but now they held a different energy, reminders of where she had fought and struggled, of battles won and lost. But she understood now that they wouldn't define her. She was more than her past. That night, as she lay in a soft bed for the first time in who knew how long, Claire gazed out at the stars from her window. They sparkled like tiny beacons of hope, each one representing a possibility that lay before her. She felt a sense of calm envelop her, blending with determination, a rare combination born from the ashes of what had been. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but as she drifted into a peaceful sleep, one thought resonated deeply. She was ready to reclaim her story, one courageous step at a time. And with a cowboy by her side, she knew she could face whatever lay ahead. The wind howled through the empty fields of Texas, carrying with it the echo of a woman's racing heart. Inside a dusty chicken coop, she crouched low, surrounded by the frantic clucks of startled hens. The damp straw beneath her felt like a fragile promise, but the weight of her fear pressed heavy. She had escaped, but the feeling of safety remained a distant dream. Outside, boots trudged along the gravel, sharp and unwavering. Come on out, a voice called, deep and steady, cutting through the veil of silence. She held her breath, the clatter of her heart loud in her ears. Who was this man? Did he mean her harm? The world outside felt like a dangerous unknown, a stark contrast to the cramped safety of her hiding place. Just hours before, she had taken the bold step of fleeing a life that suffocated her, desperately grasping for freedom. Please, he urged again, softer now, almost coaxing. You don't have to be afraid. Those words entered her like a whisper of salvation, igniting a flicker of hope deep within. But doubt gnawed at her. Could she trust him? Or was he just another face in a long line of betrayal? For so long, she had been conditioned to fear, to hide, to expect nothing but disappointment. Slowly, she inched toward the door of the coop, bracing herself against the cool wood. Her fingers trembled as she peered through the gap. There he stood, a cowboy, tall and rugged, framed by the silver light of the moon. His hat cast shadows over his eyes, but there was no malice in his stance, just a world of experience and empathy. "I'm Jake," he said, his voice steady, a contrast to the fear pounding in her chest. A rush of thoughts cascaded through her mind. Memories of a life controlled by fear flooded her consciousness, choking off her breath. She had seen too much, endured too much. Trusting strangers felt like a dangerous game, yet this man, this cowboy, held a glimmer of something different possibility. She finally managed to ask, the words slipping out but charged with doubt. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be free," he replied, the sincerity in his tone resonating with something deep inside her. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I know what it's like to feel trapped." The sound of a truck engine roared in the distance, snapping her back to her reality. Anxiety surged through her. She exclaimed, fear gripping her throat. She could sense the danger lurking just outside the shadows. Jake's expression shifted, urgency cutting through the sincerity that had initially charmed her. He didn't wait for her to respond, grabbing her wrist gently yet firmly, his warmth igniting something she thought was lost. "Please, just trust me," he urged as they darted from the coop, the cool night air crashing into her face like a wave. She followed him to an old, weathered truck parked nearby, her heart pounding as if it wanted to escape her chest. This was it, the moment she either returned to the clutches of her past or stepped into an uncertain future. With a shaky breath, she jumped into the passenger seat as Jake slid in beside her. The engine roared to life, drowning out the sound of their approaching pursuers. "Hold on," he said, gripping the wheel tightly as they sped away, dust swirling behind them. Each bump along the road jolted her, a reminder that the world was raw and unpredictable. Yet she also felt a flicker of freedom as they raced toward the unknown. He asked, eyes focused ahead but his concern clear. "Claire," she replied, feeling the weight of her name hang in the air. I ran away, I was hiding." "Claire," he repeated, the sound oddly comforting. "You've taken the hardest step." The reality of her situation began to sink in. She had abandoned everything for the chance of a new life, yet the shadows of her past still loomed large. She asked, uncertainty pooling in her stomach. "They won't," he assured her, his voice steady. "I won't let that happen." As they sped through the familiar landscape of Texas, the tension between them began to ebb, replaced by an unspoken bond that was forming in the shared uncertainty of the night. With each mile, something deep within her began to shift. The chains that had bound her to an unyielding life started to feel softer, and for the first time she felt a spark of hope. She asked, curiosity pushing through her fears. Jake glanced at her, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "Because I've seen what happens when someone lets fear dictate their life." As he spoke, she noticed the way his hands tensed around the steering wheel, how his jaw clenched as he navigated through the twists and turns of the road. Each movement seemed purposeful, as if he were fighting against ghosts that hung heavy in the air. In that shared moment she understood, a kindred spirit on a journey of escape. The headlights of the truck disappeared in the rearview mirror, and the world outside turned into endless fields under the star-studded sky. With every passing moment, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift, replaced with an exhilarating sense of possibility. Claire asked, the question lingering between them. "There's a ranch just up ahead," Jake replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "It's my family's place. We've got rooms and plenty of space." A ranch, images of open spaces, freedom, and potential danced through her mind. Did she dare dream of a future, or was this just another fleeting moment, an illusion crafted from desperation? She pressed, needing reassurance amidst the growing uncertainty. "They won't," he repeated, firmness underlining his words. "The people who mean you harm can't follow you here." The truck rumbled down the dirt road, the irregular rhythm soothing her frayed nerves, each bump serving as a reminder that she was breaking free from something oppressive. As she looked out at the moonlit landscape, adrenaline surged in her veins, pulling her forward into the unknown. Moonlight spilled across the fields, and she felt alive for the first time in ages. Her past had been shrouded in darkness, and now hope flickered like a candle in the night. "I still don't really know you," she said, a small, hesitant smile creeping onto her face. He laughed softly, and it was an unexpected sound that cut through the tension. "You'll get to know me." Something in his warmth set her at ease, even as fear still coiled in her stomach. She watched him, the way he carried himself, the emotions swimming behind his eyes. There was honesty in him that sparked admiration and curiosity. The truck groaned as it turned onto a gravel driveway, and the silhouette of the ranch emerged in the distance, proudly standing against the night sky. Her breath caught in her throat as they approached the familiar structure, laced with memories of a sun-drenched childhood, a connection rooted in independence and simplicity. Could this simple place hold the promise of healing? Jake parked the truck and turned to her, his gaze steady. "This is it," he said softly. She stepped out, the cool night air brushing against her skin like a lover's caress. The scent of hay wafted through the air, mingling with the heavy weight of possibility. As they walked together toward the door, anticipation buzzed around them, a palpable energy fueled by trust and the unknown. Inside, the ambience was warm and inviting. She marveled at the rustic charm, the worn wooden beams, the faint smell of coffee brewing in the corner. This felt like more than just shelter. It held the promise of a new beginning. As they entered, Jake gestured to a cozy chair in the living room. "Sit for a moment." She sank into the chair, allowing herself to breathe for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The stillness enveloped her, soothing the raw edges of her fear. It was here in this moment that she felt the weight of 1,000 choices, the steps that had brought her to this very place. When Jake returned with steaming mugs, they sat across from one another, the flickering flame of hope lighting the space between them. "Tell me what you dream of," he encouraged, a genuine spark in his eyes. Claire hesitated, the words feeling foreign, almost elusive. "Dream? What did that even mean?" "I want to feel free," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. His gaze softened, and he nodded as though he understood her more deeply than she did herself. "And that's exactly what you deserve. Power." In that world, it felt like a distant concept. But under Jake's encouragement, she began to envision the possibility of crafting her identity anew, of stepping away from a past consumed by control. As they sipped coffee and shared stories, laughter and vulnerability began to weave their lives together, transforming the space around them. Every shy smile, every hesitant confession created a tapestry of understanding, a connection that bound them in this shared journey. Hours slipped away, lost in the rhythm of friendship changing into something deeper. With dawning clarity, Claire saw beyond her fears. This was a new chapter, a promise to herself, to reclaim her narrative and step boldly toward the future. As night stretched further into morning, she felt the first stirrings of dawn pinks and oranges washing the horizon, dispersing the remnants of night. Outside, the world began to awaken, and with it, so did her spirit. Here was a chance to rebuild, to find her voice amid the vastness of open fields and endless skies. Jake asked, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the emerging light. "Yes," she breathed, determination igniting in her heart. As they stood outside, the sun kissed the horizon, threading golden rays through the clouds, a promise of brighter days ahead. With Jake by her side, she felt stronger, more capable than ever before. At that moment, Claire knew she would never return to the darkness that had once threatened to swallow her whole. She had found her voice, her strength, a promise not just made to herself but echoed in the vastness of the world. Together, they took the first step into a future filled with limitless potential. Together, they would forge a path marked by resilience and hope, turning the page toward an unwritten story that was finally hers to tell. In the heart of the Texas plains, a girl rose from the ashes of her past, ready to face whatever came next, no longer just hiding in a chicken coop, but boldly stepping into the light of her own choosing. She crouched in the darkness of the chicken coop, heart pounding in her chest as she listened to the sounds of the night. The clucks of the hens provided a nervous soundtrack, but it was the distant rumble of an engine that made her breath quicken. She pressed herself against the wooden wall, feeling the prick of straw against her skin. Each cluck felt louder than the last, as if the chickens were sensing her fear and crying out for help. Just hours before, she had made a daring escape from a life that felt like a suffocating cage. Now here she was, hiding among the hens, hoping she wouldn't be found. Panic fluttered in her chest as the engine of the truck grew closer. A voice boomed, cutting through the stillness like a knife. She held her breath, the fear of being discovered tightening around her like a noose. Who was this man searching for her? Did he mean harm, or was he the lifeline she had been praying for? His voice softened, a contrast to the authority he had just commanded. There was something about the way he spoke that made her heart skip a beat. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open just enough to peek through the gap. The silhouette of a tall figure stood against the moonlight, framed by the glow of distant stars. A cowboy. He was rugged, with a face marked by the sun and a warm glint in his eyes that belied the strength in his stance. She whispered, uncertainty coiling within her. "My name's Jake," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Her heart raced as she surveyed him, searching for any sign of deception. Jake paused, his brow furrowing slightly. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to run from something." In that moment, something shifted within her. Could he really understand? Could he be different from those she had encountered before? The thought flickered like candlelight in her mind, and before she could think too hard about it, she pushed the door open. As soon as she stepped out into the moonlight, she could feel warmth flooding her veins. "I'm Claire," she said, taking a hesitant step toward him. The sound of a truck engine revved closer, breaking her moment of courage. Jake urged, urgency radiating from him as he beckoned her toward a weathered pickup truck parked just a few yards away. Every fiber in her being screamed for her to turn back, but she felt the weight of desire and desperation propel her forward. She sprinted across the gravel, and as soon as she climbed into the passenger seat, fear and hope twisted together like two sides of a coin. Jake jumped into the driver's seat, starting the engine with a roar that drowned out the thudding of her heart. Without a word, he hit the gas and they were off, the world outside a blur of darkness and stars. He finally asked, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. My boyfriend," Claire admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She felt the weight of her words hang in the air, each syllable dredging up memories that had haunted her. She had tried to break free once before, but he always found her. And now it felt like the chase had begun anew. "You're safe with me," Jake declared, and the way he said it breathed life into her spirit. It was a promise, a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. But the fear clung to her. She pressed, panic swirling like a storm within her. "He won't," Jake replied, his voice steady with conviction. "Not if we keep moving. Here, everyone deserves a second chance." Claire peered out the window, the familiar landscape morphing into an unfamiliar blur. The night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the wind, but her mind was racing with doubt. Could she really trust this man who had just found her hidden in a chicken coop? She asked suddenly, the curiosity spilling out before she had a chance to hold it back. He glanced at her, and for a moment the weight of his past flickered behind his eyes. "Because I've seen too many people lose their way." His sincerity comforted her, grounding her amid the chaos. She wondered, taking a risk and diving deeper. A shadow passed over his face. "I lost someone once," he admitted quietly. "Someone who was taken away because they didn't believe they were strong enough." As he spoke, Claire felt her defenses beginning to crack open. It was different being on this side of fear. Here was a man willing to give a part of himself so that she could escape her past, and somehow that felt like a miracle. They drove in silence for a while, the rhythm of the truck a soothing heartbeat against the tension that had tightly coiled in her stomach. The further they drove, the more her fear began to ebb, replaced with a spark of courage she hadn't felt in years. She finally asked, her voice firm, filled with a determination she didn't quite feel yet, but wanted to. "We'll find a safe place for you to stay. My brother and I run a ranch not far from here." He glanced at her, a flicker of resolve igniting in his eyes. "You deserve a fresh start, Claire." The sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold. In the dim light of dawn, the world appeared different, as if magic was woven into each blade of grass and every distant cloud. Claire looked out of the window, mesmerized by the beauty unfolding before her. The dark shadows of her past felt lighter, almost washed away by the dawn's embrace. She asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Only if you know where to look," Jake replied, a smile breaking through his seriousness. "Just wait until you see the ranch." They turned down a long gravel driveway, and as they approached the ranch house, Claire felt a rush of emotions rise up: hope, fear, anticipation all warring within her. The house was an old wooden structure, weathered by time but still standing tall. Surrounding it were fields sprawling endlessly, free and unrestrained. Jake parked the truck and turned to her, his expression earnest. "This is it?" she asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. "He won't find you here," Jake assured her. "You're safe." The door to the ranch creaked open, revealing a tall man with sandy hair and an equally warm smile. "Hey, Jake," he quickly noticed Claire sitting in the passenger seat. "This is Claire," Jake said, his voice filled with pride. The man nodded, his eyes softening with understanding. "Welcome, Claire. I'm Noah, Jake's brother." As she climbed out of the truck, Claire felt a rush of gratitude wash over her. Here were two men who didn't even know her yet were ready to offer her help. But even with that gratitude, the shadows of uncertainty still clung to her. "Come on in," Noah said, gesturing toward the house. As they entered, the scent of coffee greeted her like a warm embrace. Noah led her into the kitchen, where the sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating the simple yet cozy space. There was something comforting about the way the ranch felt like a refuge from the chaos that had consumed her life. Sitting down at the table, Claire took a deep breath, letting the aroma of breakfast fill her with a sense of normalcy. She glanced at Jake, who was fixing a plate for her. There was a warmth in his eyes that made her believe that for the first time in a long while she could be free. As they ate together, sharing stories and laughter, the shadows of her past began to recede into the background. Their dynamic felt different, filled with an easy camaraderie that began to chip away at the walls she had built around her heart. Once breakfast was done, Claire felt the flicker of hope transform into something more substantial. She asked, looking between the brothers. Jake placed his hand on hers, a small gesture that ignited a warmth within her. "Now, we plan for your future. You don't have to go back to that life." She pressed, the doubts creeping back in, tethering her to the past. "We start small," Noah said. "We'll help you find your footing. Maybe look for a job in town, get settled." Jake nodded. "You can even stay here as long as you need." As Claire considered their words, a sensation she hadn't felt in so long washed over her freedom. The thought of building her own life, step by step, filled her with an invigorating sense of power. She looked at the two men who had chosen to believe in her when she had almost given up on believing in herself. "Good," she said finally, her voice steady with newfound determination. "Good is just the beginning," Jake replied, a hopeful smile breaking through. The days turned into weeks and Claire settled into life on the ranch. She spent time cleaning the stalls, feeding the animals, and even witnessing the sunrise paint the sky with colors she hadn't known existed. With every passing day, she slowly unearthed pieces of herself that had been buried under the weight of fear. Jake and Noah became more than friends. They became her family. There were laughter-filled evenings around the fire, stories shared late into the night, and moments filled with genuine connection that made her feel alive again. But one night, as the stars twinkled brightly above, memories of her past crept back in, ghost-like and haunting. She found herself lying in bed, the shadow of the man she had escaped looming large over her thoughts. It was as if every moment of hesitation threatened to unravel the freedom she had fought so hard to earn. That evening, Jake found her staring up at the stars, lost in thought. He asked, concern lacing his voice. Sometimes I think about him," she admitted quietly, feeling the vulnerability of her admission. "Then we'll deal with it, together," he replied, sitting in the grass beside her. "You've got a community now and we won't let anyone hurt you." His words wrapped around her like a warm blanket and something deep inside her unraveled. "I'm so scared," she confessed. "It's okay to be scared," Jake said gently, taking her hand in his. "But use that fear to motivate you, not imprison you. You have every right to reclaim your life." As she sat beside him, their hands intertwined under the celestial tapestry of stars, Claire found resolve building within her. This was her chance to turn the tide, to reclaim her power and rewrite her narrative. She wasn't just fleeing from darkness, she was stepping into the light. With a newfound sense of purpose, days turned into months. With Jake and Noah's support, she found a job at a local cafe, blossoming into her own skin again. She learned to trust, laugh, and dream, not just of freedom, but of a life that was fully hers. One day, as she walked through the bustling town after work, the sun casting warm rays on her face, she realized she had taken agency over her life in a way she never thought possible. She turned to head back toward the ranch, the sense of home deepening with each passing day. But the stillness she had fought so hard to attain was shattered when she spotted an all-too-familiar figure in the distance. Her heart dropped, sheer panic rising in her throat as she felt the ground slipping away beneath her feet. There he was, her past personified, standing just across the street, eyes scanning the crowds. Time seemed to freeze and darkness rushed in, consuming her thoughts. This was the moment of confrontation that she had dreaded. These were the shadows of her past that she thought she had left behind. And then, as if sensing her unease from a distance, Jake appeared by her side. He looked at her, his expression a mix of concern and strength. "Claire, stay close to me," he said, his voice firm yet gentle. The way he stood there, unwavering, ignited a fire within her. She felt the strength she'd nurtured bloom, transforming fear into action. She wasn't alone. She had fought to reclaim her own life, and she would not let fear dictate her future. As her past approached, the world around her faded. But instead of retreating, Claire stood tall. She faced him, fear melting away in the light of newfound courage. The memories that once clawed at her heart felt less potent now, diminished by the strength she'd gained. She shouted, her voice steady, unyielding. Jake's hand found hers, grounding her as adrenaline surged through her veins. The figure hesitated, confusion flashing across his face. For the first time, she saw him for what he truly was, a coward hiding behind manipulation and intimidation. She was no longer a victim, she was a warrior. Jake stepped forward, unwavering. "You don't have a claim on her anymore." In that moment, Claire transformed. The fear that had once gripped her now surged into resolve. She had a future waiting for her, filled with friendships and possibilities. With the strength radiating from Jake, she felt empowered to cut ties with the darkness. The air buzzed with tension. She could feel the eyes of the town upon them. But in the middle of the uncertainty, she saw the threads of her new life woven through each moment she had shared with Jake and Noah. "Don't come near me again," she stated firmly. With a furrowed brow, the figure blinked, realization washing over him as he took a step back, the power he once wielded in her life evaporating into the air. He turned and retreated, leaving Claire standing tall in the face of her past. As he disappeared from sight, the weight that had haunted her for years fell away. Claire turned to Jake, eyes wide, heart racing with adrenaline and victory. "You did it," he said softly, a smile breaking out across his face. And in that moment of triumph, Claire knew she truly was free. She had proved herself a warrior, not just once but every day she chose to embrace life boldly and unapologetically. "A second chance," she murmured, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and possibility. "Absolutely," Jake replied, his hand still holding hers. Together they stood under the vast sky, filled with stars beyond counting, both glowing with the promise of what was yet to come. As the sun began to set, painting the world in shades of gold, Claire realized she wasn't just reclaiming a life lost. She was forging an entirely new path, one lined with dreams and destiny, and she wouldn't have to walk it alone. Tomorrow would dawn a new day, and she would continue to embrace every moment that life offered, hand in hand with the man who had found her hiding in a chicken coop and believed in the power of light over darkness. The night was thick with tension, the kind that wraps around your throat and makes every shadow feel like a threat. In the small, dimly lit chicken coop, a young woman crouched low, feeling the sharp edges of straw dig into her skin. The clucks of the chickens filled her ears but felt muted against the thumping of her heart. Fear gripped her as she pressed her back against the coarse wooden wall, every muscle in her body coiled in anticipation. Just hours earlier, she had run into the darkness, leaving a life that had become too heavy to bear. Now, she was trying to believe that freedom was real, despite the suffocating dread whispering in her mind. Outside, the crunching of gravel echoed down the drive like footsteps of doom, and she wished she could melt into the shadows. A deep voice called out, slicing through the stillness like a knife. Her breath caught in her throat. What if he was here to drag her back? Panic surged through her veins, and she pressed herself even further into the darkness. A part of her wanted to scream, to run, but where could she go? "Please," the voice continued, softer now, more coaxing. "You don't have to be afraid. Help." It was a word that sent shivers down her spine. She had once believed in the kindness of strangers, but that belief had been shattered long ago. Her heart raced, caught between hope and fear. Could this man be different? Taking another breath, she felt compelled to peek through a crack in the door. Amidst the shadows, she saw him, a cowboy, tall and resolute, framed against the silver light of the moon. His face was carved by sun and time, the lines telling stories of their own. Something softened in his eyes as he looked toward her, a deep kindness that beckoned her to trust. She managed to whisper, her voice barely a thread above the night's chorus. "My name is Jake," he replied, his tone steady. Something in her gut stirred in response. He was offering an escape, a lifeline. But trust was not easily granted. "You don't know me," she countered, doubt creeping in. "No, but I can see that you're scared," he said, taking a step closer, hands visible at his sides, palms open. "And I can't stand by and let you be hunted." In that moment, she felt the walls she had built begin to crack. She had evaded a life that controlled her with smooth, merciless hands. Could this man, this cowboy, truly understand her pain? The thought flickered in her mind, and suddenly she felt an overwhelming urge to step into the light. She whispered, curiosity tinged with fear. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he replied, his intensity grounding her. Each word pierced through her fog of doubt. With shaking fingers, she reached for the door, pushing it open just wide enough to step into the moonlit night. Outside, the air felt electric, tinged with possibilities. "That's it," Jake encouraged as she stepped forward. "Come with me." The moment she stepped out, the chaos in her mind quieted. Behind her, the chickens clucked restlessly, as if sensing the enormity of the choice she was making. The world outside felt raw and alive, an intoxicating blend of fear and freedom that sent adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She asked, trying to sound brave, even as uncertainty clung to her. "To my truck," he replied, and she followed him toward a weathered vehicle parked nearby. The sound of gravel crunching beneath their feet seemed to echo their urgency. She climbed into the passenger seat, heart racing. Every instinct told her to turn back, but it was too late. She had already chosen this path. Jake slid into the driver's seat, turning the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, filling the silence with a sense of purpose. As they sped out of the dim light of the ranch, she felt her own courage rising, an unfamiliar warmth igniting within her. She asked, the fear bubbling back to the surface as the headlights illuminated the road ahead. Jake's jaw tightened. "He won't," he assured her, focus unwavering. "I won't let that happen." The night stretched infinitely, shadows rushing past as they drove further into the unknown. Claire looked at the cowboy beside her, trying to make sense of this peculiar connection. He felt like a storm and a shelter all at once, a riddle wrapped in mystery. She asked hesitantly, wanting to know more about the man who had found her in her darkest moment. Jake's eyes flickered momentarily, a trace of vulnerability breaking through. "I grew up in this very area," he said, his voice laced with nostalgia. "I've seen my fair share of heartache. I lost someone once, someone who didn't believe they could escape." The weight of his words settled between them, a bond forged in shared pain. Her voice was small, but her heart swelled with understanding. She could finally see that they were two souls caught in a world that felt far too big. "Exactly," he said, his grip on the wheel steady. "And I want you to know that there's hope beyond this moment." Their journey continued, the landscape shifting from familiar fields to open highways. A sense of peace settled as the horizon began to lighten with the promise of dawn. Claire found herself growing more comfortable, the sense of refuge wrapping around her like a warm blanket. As they drove, she felt compelled to open up. "I had to escape. He thought he owned me." Memories flooded back nights spent crying and the gnawing anxiety that never seemed to fade. Jake stole a glance her way, his expression tightening. "You're brave. It takes immense strength to walk away," he said, his voice encouraging. For the first time, she felt something shift inside her, a flicker of hope. She wasn't just running, she was reclaiming her story. She asked, the doubt still swirling around her. "Then we confront it together," Jake replied, his tone unwavering. As the sun broke the horizon, a new light flooded the truck, casting a golden glow across Claire's weary face. She could feel the warmth seep into her bones, igniting a burgeoning resolve within her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the truck rolled down a long driveway that led to a sprawling ranch. "This is my place," Jake said, a hint of excitement in his voice. They parked and climbed out, the air crisp and fresh. Claire felt her heart race as she looked around. The ranch was beautiful open fields spread out as far as her eyes could see, a calmness that felt foreign yet inviting. Jake stood beside her, watching as she took in the surroundings. "If you want to stay, you can." Her heart swelled at his words. For once, she had a choice. "Of course," he replied with a reassuring smile. The enormity of what lay ahead gripped her. She had been searching for this safety, comfort, a place to breathe without fear. But even as hope flared, the specter of her past lurked just behind her consciousness. "Let's get you inside," Jake said, gently nudging her forward. The warmth of his presence felt like a shield against the cold hands of doubt. As they stepped into the house, Claire was greeted by an inviting space, sunlight flooding through the windows, illuminating everything in golden hues. It smelled of fresh bread, and the walls were adorned with photographs of happy moments, families laughing and celebrating life. "Make yourself at home," Jake said, pouring a cup of coffee and handing it to her. Claire took a sip, feeling the warmth radiate through her. It was delicious, rich, comforting, everything she had needed. This place felt like a dream, a refuge where she could heal and find herself amidst the chaos. Days turned into weeks as Claire began to settle into her new life. Mornings were filled with sunshine and laughter as she talked with Jake and his brother, Noah, sharing stories and dreams. For the first time, she was reclaiming pieces of herself that had long been lost. With their encouragement, she found a job at a nearby cafe, reconnecting with the world outside the ranch. Each day was a step forward, allowing her to breathe a little easier. The scars of her past still ached, but they began to fade like distant memories. One quiet night in their cozy living room, Claire found herself reflecting on how far she had come. The shadows of her past still loomed, but they no longer controlled her. As she sat next to Jake, she felt grateful for this newfound life. "Thank you," she said, turning to him. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You saved yourself, Claire. You made the choice to walk away." Just as she began to accept this newfound peace, an unexpected knock echoed through the house, jolting her back into a suffocating reality. Jake's expression darkened as he exchanged glances with Noah. "I'll get it," he said, his voice steady but taut. Claire's heart raced as nerves clawed at her. Memories of her past crashed over her like a wave, and she could feel the familiar terror wrapping around her throat. She glanced at Noah, who nodded encouragingly, but the dread was palpable. A moment later, Jake returned, his face pale, eyes narrowed. Time seemed to freeze as she braced herself, panic swirling in her gut. This was it. He had found her. And then from behind Jake stepped a man she had hoped never to see again. The familiar weight of pain pressed down on her, memories flooding in words laced with anger, the sharp edge of control that had punctuated her life for too long. "Hello, Claire," he said, a smug smile on his face that sent chills down her spine. She felt the air leave her lungs as she stood there frozen. Was this nightmare really happening? "Get away from her," Jake's voice cut through the air, protective and firm. He stepped forward, shielding her with his presence. "This is none of your business, Cowboy," the man sneered, eyes flaring with malice. "It is now," Jake replied, determination clawing in his voice. In that moment, Claire felt the ground shift beneath her feet, determination sparking within her chest. She was not the frightened girl hiding in a chicken coop anymore. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice wavering with newfound strength. Her words hung in the air, a declaration as powerful as a brand. The man took a step back, shock etched across his face. He asked, uncertainty creeping in, "I won't regret finding my freedom," she shot back, her voice steady. Jake stood by her side, a pillar of strength that anchored her. "Leave," Jake said, voice low but commanding. "You don't have the right to chase her anymore." The hurt turned to rage across the man's features, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he realized he was outnumbered. With a scoff, he turned on his heel and walked away, his presence evaporating like a ghost. As the door clicked shut behind him, Claire took a deep breath, the weight of dread and anxiety beginning to lift. "I did it. I faced him," she said, still trembling but filled with a sense of accomplishment. "You did it, Claire," Jake said, pride radiating from him. "And you did it on your own terms." In that moment, the shadows of her past began to recede. She had faced the very thing that had tormented her for so long and against all odds had emerged victorious. As she stood there, wrapped in the security of Jake's unwavering support, Claire felt a shift deep inside her, an explosion of certainty that she was finally free. She was no longer a girl hiding in a chicken coop, but a woman who had claimed her life back, determined to forge her own path into the world. Side by side, they stepped into the night, breathing in the cool air filled with endless possibility. Together, they walked forward into a future where each moment was ripe with potential, a story yet to be written, guided by courage and the promise of freedom. The wind howled like a restless spirit, sending waves of dust swirling through the Texas night. In the shadowy confines of a chicken coop, a young woman pressed herself against the rough wooden wall. The scent of hay and earth enveloped her, providing little comfort as her heart pounded ferociously in her chest. She had been running, fleeing from everything that had suffocated her, and now she was hiding, praying that her desperate escape would hold. Echoes of laughter from the nearby farmhouse floated through the thin walls, mingling with the rustle of the chickens, oblivious to her plight. She knew she shouldn't risk being caught. Each cluck sounded like a siren warning of impending danger that could shatter this fragile moment of hope. Suddenly, the heavy crunch of boots on gravel grew near. With a jolt, she bit her lip, stifling a gasp. The fear coursed through her like ice, freezing her at the core. What if it was him? What if this was the end of her quest for freedom? Each breath felt labored as she pressed deeper into the straw, wishing she could become invisible. "Please," the voice continued, softer this time, cluttered with an urgency that flickered just outside her fear. Something in those words struck a chord, slicing the tension with a glimmer of possibility. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open a crack and peeked out into the dim moonlight. There, silhouetted against the fading light, stood a cowboy, tall and rugged, framed by the vast expanse of a star-spangled sky. He was handsome in a way that felt grounded yet mysterious, his strong jaw framed by the shadows, hinting at a life lived outdoors. She whispered, her voice trembling but barely audible above the clucking hens. "My name is Jake," he replied, stepping closer, his voice warm but urgent. What was it about his tone? A mix of sincerity and desperation that seemed genuine. Could she trust him? After all, trust had brought her nothing but pain in the past. The weight of her memories closed in on her as she weighed her options, heart racing like a wild stallion. She asked, her voice shaky but defiant. "Because I know what it feels like to be trapped," he said, locking eyes with hers. Claire felt the walls around her heart starting to crack. This wasn't just some stranger. There was a raw, palpable energy in his words. It resonated with her experiences, cocooning her in a sense of understanding. But would she really take that leap of faith? Just then, the distant sound of a truck engine growled to life, a dark reminder of the threat hovering near. "We need to go," Jake urged, his brow furrowing as he looked toward the noise. A flood of adrenaline coursed through her veins, igniting the fight or flight response deep within. Could she really trust this man? Would he be her savior, or was he just another illusion hiding behind kind words? Every instinct told her to run, but the nightmare of going back paralyzed her. Claire took a deep breath, the fabric of her old life still clinging to her like a ghost. But just then she felt it, an ember of courage igniting within her. She was tired of hiding, tired of being a victim. Moving against her fear, she nodded and stepped out of the coupe. Jake opened the passenger door of an old truck parked nearby, an inviting smile breaking out across his face. The engine purred with a low growl beneath the hood, like a beast ready to take flight. "Get in," he said. Could this really be true? She climbed into the truck, anxiety battling with a flicker of hope. As Jake slid into the driver's seat beside her, he turned to her, the sincerity in his eyes acting as a calming balm. "I promise, no one is going to hurt you," he reassured her. The moment he turned the key and the truck roared to life, Claire felt the past fading, drifting further away as they sped down the dirt road, leaving the chicken coop and everything she had known far behind. She asked, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "To my family's ranch," Jake replied, the wind whipping through the open window. "Safe." That word hung heavy in the air, a lifeline tossed into the waves of uncertainty that had engulfed her for so long. Her mind raced as she contemplated what lay ahead. The escape felt surreal, but as fear ebbed into the background, a new sense of freedom washed over her. Claire asked, allowing herself to be vulnerable for the first time in a long while. Jake glanced at her, vulnerability dancing in his eyes. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," he said, determination anchoring his words. "I've seen enough lives destroyed by fear." Something in her stirred a flicker of resilience that she thought had dissipated long ago. She asked, leaning into the silence of the truck, willing to trust just a little more. "I do," he said, a note of empathy threading through his voice. "I lost someone dear to me because they couldn't break free from a toxic relationship." As he spoke, Claire felt the remnants of her past flickering in and out, battling against a newfound sense of purpose. For the first time since she had escaped, the weight of her experiences transformed into something she could use to fuel her fire. The truck rumbled along the narrow dirt road, the landscape blurring into a whirl of colors. Memories of her old life dark, oppressive, and full of fear faded like distant ghosts. Jake asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Her heart clenched. Dreaming felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. But there it was, a seed of hope planted in her heart. "I want to find myself again," she admitted, the words spilling out. And with that, the world outside began to shift again, sunlight breaking through the trees, casting vibrant beams across the dashboard. There was something about the light, the air feeling charged and alive, that ignited a yearning deep within her. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally pulled up to the ranch, a sprawling landscape of rolling hills and rustic charm. The sun hung low in the sky, bathing the land in warm hues that felt like a welcoming embrace. "This is it," Jake said, turning to her with that same kind smile. Claire stepped out of the truck, the earth cool against her feet, as she inhaled the sweet, fresh scent of hay and grass. As they walked toward the house, she imagined a future filled with possibilities. Inside, the ranch house was warm and inviting, the walls adorned with memories of laughter and family. Jake and his brother, Noah, greeted her with genuine smiles, and Claire could feel the walls around her heart melting just a little. "Make yourself at home," Noah said, pouring her a cup of coffee, the aroma filling the room like a familiar hug. The warmth enveloped her, grounding her in this moment. She had stepped away from her past and into a space that felt like a sanctuary, a refuge where she could begin to heal. Days turned into weeks as Claire settled into life on the ranch. They laughed over breakfast, shared stories, and rode horses across the open fields. Each moment felt like a step toward rediscovering who she was, a woman rising from the ashes. But even amidst this newfound freedom, the shadows occasionally crept back in. One quiet evening, Claire found herself alone in the barn, memories swirling around her like smoke. She thought of him, the man she had escaped. Was he still out there? Would he come looking for her? Jake walked in, noticing the troubled expression on her face. He asked gently, concern lacing his voice. "I keep thinking about him," she admitted, the weight of her vulnerability settling around her. "What if he finds me?" His face hardened slightly and he stepped closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "I promise to protect you." Claire looked up at him, the sincerity in his gaze sparking courage within her. Maybe she didn't have to go through this alone. Maybe this was part of reclaiming her strength, allowing herself to lean on others when the burden felt too heavy. She asked, her voice trembling. Jake nodded, his grip on her shoulder firm. Absolutely. With those words, Claire's breath steadied, and for the first time since her journey began, she felt a flicker of peace. Perhaps the darkness that had haunted her wasn't as powerful as she once thought. As the days continued, Claire flourished in her new life. With the support of Jake and Noah, she found a job in a nearby small town, something that excited her and terrified her at the same time. She was regaining her independence, slowly reclaiming pieces of herself that had been lost. But with each step forward, Claire remained vigilant. The fear of the past still lingered, a shadow on the edges of her newfound happiness. Then one fateful morning, when the sun broke through the clouds like a beacon of hope, everything changed. As Claire walked back from her shift, she spotted a familiar figure standing at the edge of the property, a shadow from her past, a ghost she thought she'd left behind. Her heart sank, panic rising like bile in her throat. She shouted, her voice cracking as she turned to run back to the ranch house. But before she could reach the safety of the porch, the figure stepped forward, blocking her path. Well, if it isn't my little runaway," he sneered, a malicious grin spreading across his face. Time stood still as Claire stared into those dark eyes that had once held so much power over her. Fear engulfed her, but this time, instead of crumbling, something shifted within her. "No," she whispered fiercely, shaking her head. Just then Jake came barreling around the corner, eyes blazing with concern. He shouted, moving toward her. The moment was electric, the air thick with tension as Claire stood her ground, heart racing wildly, but this time, nothing could push her back. She was not the same scared girl hiding in a chicken coop. Jake's voice dropped low, authority weaving through his tone as he stepped in front of her, shielding her from the man who had once threatened her freedom. Claire felt the warmth of Jake's strength beside her. She shouted, her voice trembling but defiant. "No one wants you anymore," he taunted, but his bravado faltered as he realized the determination in her eyes. "Maybe I'm finally free," she shot back, her heart swelling with resilience. Jake's presence infused her with courage. Together they stood strong, facing the shadow who had once loomed over her life. With an incredulous glare, the man stepped back, surprise flashing across his features. His confidence faltered under the weight of their unity. Without a word, he turned and fled, disappearing into the horizon that had once filled her with dread. In that moment, Claire felt a rush of triumph, a powerful wave of liberation washing over her. She had faced her fears head-on and emerged victorious, not just for herself but for every woman who had ever felt trapped. Turning to Jake, tears brimming in her eyes, she whispered, "I did it. I faced him." Jake's eyes glistened with pride as he pulled her into a warm embrace. "You were never alone," he said softly. As they stood together, the sun breaking through the clouds, Claire understood that she was reborn, a woman who had reclaimed her narrative with strength, courage, and the invaluable support of those who believed in her. From that day forward, Claire embraced each moment, cherishing the newfound freedom and the life she was building. She was no longer hiding in a chicken coop. She was stepping boldly into the light, ready to embrace whatever came next. Together with Jake and Noah by her side, she walked into a future filled with endless possibilities, a life alive with hope, laughter, and the unyielding promise of new beginnings. The shadows of her past may still linger, but they would never extinguish the fire within her. She was finally free. The night was thick with anticipation, the kind of silence that sits heavy in the air, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the soft clucking of chickens. In the shadowy confines of a chicken coop, a young woman pressed her back against the wooden wall, heart racing. The smell of straw filled her lungs as she crouched low, hiding from a reality she desperately wanted to escape. Just hours earlier, she had slipped away from a life that felt like a tight noose around her throat. Memories of fear and control haunted her, forcing her to seek refuge in this cramped space. With each soft cluck of the hens, a question echoed in her mind. Would she be found? Suddenly, the sound of crunching gravel drew closer, each step heavy against the quiet night. A deep voice rang out, commanding and filled with authority. "I know you're in there." Her heart raced. What if it was him? What if this was the moment everything fell apart? She pressed deeper into the shadows, desperate to become invisible. As if sensing her turmoil, the chickens shifted uneasily, their clucks growing frantic. "Please," the voice continued, shifting from demanding to coaxing. "You don't have to be afraid." She hesitated, wrestling with her instincts to hide. Could this man truly be different? In a moment of recklessness, she cracked the door open just enough to glimpse the figure outside. There stood a cowboy, tall and strong, silhouetted against the glow of the moon. His Stetson cast a shadow over his eyes, but his face was etched with an earnestness that stirred something deep inside her. She managed, voice trembling. "My name is Jake," he replied. His words felt like a lifeline, a chance for freedom she hadn't expected. But could she trust him? After everything she'd experienced, after all the broken promises? She asked, a mixture of defiance and fear curling her fingers around the doorframe. "Because I know what it feels like to be trapped," Jake replied, his gaze steady. "And I can't let you face that alone." Claire felt a flicker of hope igniting within her, a candle flame against the oncoming storm. The distant growl of a truck engine echoed in the darkness, and her heart sank. She knew she needed to decide, and quickly. "It's now or never," Jake said, urgency coloring his tone. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open wider. "Okay," she whispered, stepping into the light of the moon. "Get in," he urged, nodding toward his truck parked just a few feet away. It seemed ordinary enough, a weathered vehicle, slightly rusted around the edges. But to her, it was a chance at something more than just survival. She hopped into the passenger seat, the adrenaline surging through her veins as the door clicked shut. Jake climbed in beside her, quickly starting the engine. The sound roared to life, drowning out the chaotic whispers of her mind, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt like freedom. As they sped away from the coupe, Claire could see the shadows of trees blurring past, the darkness swallowing her past whole. She asked, her voice shaky yet filled with resolve. "To my family's ranch," Jake replied, eyes focused on the road ahead. Safe. The word struck a chord deep within her. It had become something she longed for yet felt undeserving of. But here was a chance to rebuild, to reclaim what had been stolen from her. She pressed, doubt creeping back in. "He won't," Jake assured her, his voice filled with solid conviction. "Once we make it to the ranch, you can rest. I promise you'll be safe." With the engine's rumble echoing in the silence of the Texas night, she allowed herself a small smile, a brief moment of light in a world gripped by shadows. As they drove further into the heart of the wilderness, something inside her began to shift. The grip of her past, once suffocating, now felt a little less tight with each passing mile. She asked, curiosity breaking through the veil of fear. If he was risking so much for her, there had to be a reason. He paused for a moment, eyes flickering to her before locking back onto the road. "I grew up around here, learned how to ride horses and handle cattle, but I've seen too many lives ruined by people who take what they want without consideration for others." As he spoke, they rounded a bend, and the ranch appeared before them, sprawling fields bathed in moonlight, an old farmhouse standing proud at the center with a sense of warmth permeating the space. For the first time in what felt like forever, Claire allowed herself to hope. This could be a new beginning, a life free of fear. They pulled up to the house and Jake turned to her, his gaze softening. Claire stepped out of the truck, the cool earth grounding her as she took in the panorama before her. The vastness around her felt like a balm against the lingering anxiety. Inside, the ranch had an air of comfort, with wooden beams warming the spaces around her. Jake's brother, Noah, was in the kitchen, his bright smile breaking the tension in the room. "Hey, Jake." His gaze quickly turned to Claire, curiosity sparking in his eyes. "This is Claire," Jake said, pride lacing his voice. "Welcome, Claire," Noah said, an easy warmth in his tone. "Make yourself at home." For the first time in ages, Claire felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, a sense of belonging. Perhaps the darkness wouldn't follow her here. Perhaps she could truly start fresh. As days turned into weeks, Claire began to embrace her new life. The ranch became a sanctuary where she found solace in the routines of farm life. With Jake and Noah's guidance, she fed the animals, tended to the gardens, and soaked in rays of sunshine that warmed her soul. But shadows still lingered. Sometimes during quiet moments, memories of her old life would claw their way back, whispering doubts that tugged at her heart. One evening, as she lingered in the barn, she felt that familiar dread creep back in, wrapping around her as if it never truly left. "Hey," Jake said, stepping into the barn to find her. "I can't shake this feeling," she admitted, feeling vulnerable. "What if he finds me?" Jake walked closer, his presence a steady grounding force against her fears. "You're not running anymore, you're building a life, but it's okay to feel scared." His words offered a flicker of comfort, but she still felt uncertain. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending," she confessed, the weight of her insecurities spilling out. "You're stronger than you think, Claire," he said, sincerity radiating off him like sunlight. "You're here, you're alive, and you're making choices." With his encouragement, she found solace in the routine of ranch life, slowly stitching her fragmented sense of self back together. She began to laugh again, real, hearty laughs filled with joy that mingled with the crisp Texas wind. But in the quiet depths of night, when the world was still, the specter of her past haunted her dreams. She would wake in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the fear gripping her throat as it had done so many times before. One particularly sleepless night, Claire wandered outside to catch her breath, the cool air wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. As she leaned against the fence, gazing up at the stars, her thoughts drifted. Would she ever truly be free? Suddenly, footsteps approached from behind her, and she turned to see Jake emerging from the shadows. He asked gently, concern dancing in his eyes. "Just thinking," she replied, the night sky reflecting the turbulence of her thoughts. He stepped closer, the warmth of his presence calming. "It's a heavy burden to carry." Claire took a deep breath, sharing her fears with him. "I worry that I'll slip back into my old life," she admitted, "that I'll wake up one day and find it all collapsing again." "You won't," Jake assured her, his voice steady. "We'll face this together no matter what comes." Feeling bolstered by his unwavering strength, Claire took a step closer, gratitude swelling within her. "You've done so much for me. You don't have to repay anything," he said, a teasing smile breaking through the seriousness. As they stood beneath the stars, Claire felt the tension inside her easing slightly. Maybe she wouldn't be judged by her past, but rather embraced for who she was becoming. But the calm was short-lived. Just as she began to sink into that warmth, the unsettling sound of a truck rumbling in the distance interrupted the serenity of the night. Her heart raced, panic seizing her as she turned to Jake, fear flooding her features. "They're coming," she whispered, eyes wide. Jake's expression hardened as he glanced toward the road. "Stay here," he said, positioning himself in front of her. She urged, fear gripping her heart. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he promised. "Just stay put." With that, he moved toward the driveway, his strong figure silhouetted against the night sky. Claire held her breath, anxiety knotting her stomach. What if this was it? What if she lost everything in an instant? The truck lights cut through the darkness, illuminating the gravel driveway like a spotlight. Claire felt paralyzed, fear clawing at her throat as she watched Jake walk toward the oncoming vehicle. And then she recognized it, the truck. Familiar, dark, menacing. Her heart sank as the adrenaline kicked in, a primal urge to fight or flee surging through her. She had to do something. She shouted, voice breaking in desperation. Jake turned, eyes narrowing as he strained to see who was inside. Suddenly, the truck screeched to a halt, and Claire felt the world around her spiral. Every thought coiled tightly in her chest as the truck door swung open, revealing a figure she had hoped never to see again. Jake's voice rang out, both authoritative and protective, but Claire's focus was locked on the menacing shadow stepping out of the truck. Fear gripped her as she recognized the man standing there, a twisted smile spreading across his face. The very person she thought she had escaped. He taunted, voice thick with malice. The world around Claire turned into a blur as adrenaline shot through her, drowning out the sounds of the night. She felt the ground shifting beneath her feet as her past spilled back into her present, and as she stumbled backward, disoriented, her heart raced with panic. Jake shouted, stepping in front of her like a protective wall, but Claire could barely breathe, the walls of her newfound safety collapsing around her. "No!" she yelled, desperation clawing at her throat. The darkness closed in as the figures loomed before her, and all Claire could think was, she had fought so hard for this newfound freedom. Would it all be snatched away in an instant? With breathless fear and uncertainty raging inside her, she faced the shadows of her past one last time, aware that the fight for her future was about to begin. The stakes had never been higher, and she was determined to stand her ground, no matter the cost. But would she emerge victorious or lose everything once again? The wave of tension crackled in the air, leaving Claire on the precipice of something monumental, fighting against the tide of her past, and the outcome hung in the balance like a fragile thread.